Dr. Joel Kahn, welcome back to the Plant Yourself podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
Yeah, so you've been busy. You've been out on the front lines.
I think that's true. I've got a few bullet wounds and stab wounds for getting involved in conversations about optimal diet or environmentally friendly diet, including this morning on Twitter, where I heard it said recently that's where angry old men fight all the good fights is on Twitter. But I'm a warrior for science, and the science so strongly favors plant diets that I just can't stand to see unanswered barbs when they come our way, so I answer them.
Wonderful. So you got a lot of attention for being on the Doctors, I think with Stephen Gundry of the Plant Paradox, and everyone I know thinks you won. I'm sure all of Gundry's friends think he won, like the same way we saw the polling. And you said you have a new episode that's been filmed but not released. Can you talk about that, or is that hush hush?
No, I don't think it's any problem. They film episodes of the Doctor Show for upcoming seasons. So, nothing's hotter right now, unfortunately, than the ketogenic diet. God bless Halle Berry and her tight buttocks. But she and Hugh Jackman and LeBron James and the great scientist in nutrition up for the Nobel Prize in Medicine, Kim Kardashian, who talk about, just get all the carbs out of your life, put in a high-fat diet, and you'll look slim and gorgeous. The ketogenic diet, which is just basically the Atkins diet, except people actually do it now for 6 months or 12 months or 3 years or 5 years, is very hot. So we discussed a new documentary, not so new actually, called The Magic Pill, purporting to be the what the health of the animal-based ketogenic movement, of all these miraculous medical improvements on the ketogenic diet, of which there is one. There is a response to patients with epilepsy who aren't responding to medicine to doing this kind of diet, although the literature also talks about all the side effects of doing it. Nobody on People magazine or Us magazine, US, whatever it's called, talk about the side effects. So we had ourselves a real good discussion about this documentary, which nobody should watch. I renamed the documentary The Magic Kill instead of The Magic Pill, because authentically there actually is serious science data that if you choose to eat animal products without carbs long-term, low-carb, high-fat diet, you actually may be increasing your risk of premature death. And that's not stuff I make up. It's stuff in the literature.
Yeah, can we talk about this for a little bit? Because I just got back from one of the best weekends of my life. I joined my local men's 50 and over ultimate frisbee team, and we went and played in the Nationals. And I hung out with these guys. We rented a giant Airbnb, and I just kind of fell in love with the camaraderie and with these wonderful men. And I was shocked to see what they're eating for health. And these are, smart guys, engineers, coders, high-powered lawyers. And I'm the little, the cute vegan, going to the store and buying kale and avocados, and, poor me, all of them are eating their stuff. But I kind of would like to send this episode out to them.
Okay, well,
so
let's all
pray.
Let's pray for their erectile function, because I worry that it's either been damaged or will be damaged. So for a moment of silence. Okay, we're back. That was a message to your friends.
Okay, so if they weren't turned on by your reference to Halle Berry's tight buttocks, we know we know there's a problem already, right?
Or if they're looking and not getting a response, there's a problem already. But you can correct that with enough fruits and vegetables. That's actually also a published data from Harvard that actually erectile function is enhanced by the polyphenols in fruits and vegetables more than any other food group. So this concept that low carb is healthy and high fat will promote. The idea here is if you eat low carb, glucose won't be the primary fuel in your body. Your body will shift to making a chemical group we don't normally make unless we're under severe stress, called ketone bodies. When we're starving, we make ketone bodies. When we're in diabetic crisis, we make ketone bodies. But we're now having people electively choose to shift their metabolism and force it to make ketone bodies week after week, month after month, year after year. And you can just buy for $5 at the grocery store little test strips and find out if you're spilling ketones, which when I was in medical school, that diagnosed you as a severe diabetic. Now it diagnoses you as a trendy, ultimate Frisbee member team. I don't know how you got on that over 50 team. There's some kind of problem there. But anyways, there's a couple false, and number one, there are people that say they feel better, look better, lose weight, and even some short-term studies, what are called metabolic markers, cholesterol, blood pressure, waistline, inflammation. Anytime you take the standard American diet, which can be 2/3 processed food, high in chemicals, high in salt, high in oil, high in animal foods, and you shift it cleaner, whether it's paleo cleaner, keto cleaner, because anybody adopting the keto diet, the paleo diet, is usually already, and just like vegans, we're somewhat elite. We care about our food and we think before we eat, and we're purposely buying often better food. So some of these responses are typical that anytime you take the standard American diet and improve it, you'll see some measurable response for the better. So that's why I don't argue that paleo has no value. It's just there is a downside and an environmental drain and potentially a long-term atherosclerotic drain. So that's number one. Number two, one of the brightest minds, and most people don't know this name, is a guy at the NIH named Kevin Hall. He's a researcher, and he does the most exquisite kind of studies called metabolic ward studies, like Dr. Ansel Keys used to do in the 60s, that define the role of dietary fat and cholesterol in the blood. So just in 2016, Kevin Hall took a group of men and put them on a standard diet for 4 weeks, and they had to live at the National Institutes of Health, and they had to go through intense metabolic measurements. And then he put them on an authentic ketogenic diet, 5% of calories from carbohydrates. That's really low. If I remember, like 70+% from fat calories. And these people had no choice. They were given the food. The fascinating finding in this really most elegant study of the ketogenic diet, he did document that they were making ketone bodies. They were ketogenic. Was that actually the rate at which they were burning fat slowed down, slowed down, slowed down, slowed down. And actually, he then put them on a high carb diet, low in fat, and it went back up. So actually, there was greater fat burning. Nobody believes this, but this is the most elegant science, that on a high carb diet, and there were exactly the same number of calories, because you can do that at the NIH in a metabolic ward. If you're eating 2,000 calories a day that's high carb, which is what you and I do, or 2,000 calories a day that's high fat, which is what your ultimate Frisbee mates do, you'll actually burn more fat, at least if you're in Bethesda, Maryland, at the most advanced metabolic ward anywhere, on the high carb diet. So that blows away the idea, because again, both of those diets were lower calorie than the average American, and were better in their absence of McDonald's, Wendy's, and Wahlburgers.
No, so you're saying they were isocaloric diets, meaning they were both 2,000 calories?
I didn't want to use that term. They were isocaloric diets, exactly.
And the second question is, did they do a control, or another group in which they switched, in which they had them do high carb first? Like I'm thinking like your friends from the big, the Magic Kill. Like, what is there room to quibble about this, or is this like the final word?
Nobody's yet done that exact, a ketogenic diet versus a pure whole food plant diet. We haven't had that head to head, even short term. But these people in Kevin Hall's research study were their own controls. How did they respond to high carb? How did they respond to high fat? 4 weeks. In the real world, it's hard to get people to live at the NIH for more than 8 weeks. So, that's about as long as you're going to go. And the second fallacy for the ultimate Frisbee people is that there are now about 7 studies, I've written about this, that either show an early death rate or a advanced heart disease calcification rate, but the death rate is enough. There's a study named NOTO, N-O-T-O, in 2013, 272,000 subjects studied long term. Those that described their diet, low carb, high fat, died early. And there's studies from Sweden and studies from Greece and several from the United States and such. So when your buddies are doing this, of course they've never tried a clean, whole food, plant diet, naturally low in salt, oil, and sugar, and seen how they feel and how they perform and what their numbers are like. They're going from bad diets to odd diets, very meat-heavy diets, and they may see some short-term improvement, but it's delusional in terms of believing, one, it can't be good for the environment, and nobody will ever talk about these crazies on Twitter, Dr. Sean Baker, who eats meat 3 times a day as his only food source, but will not discuss if he were actually successful at convincing large groups of people to follow him in this craziness, what's going to do to greenhouse gases and water purity and air quality and let alone animal suffering. So, there is a cult of ultimate machoism that is about, meat, that has always existed, but it actually seems like I think this is the last gasp before they all die. I really think plant-based nutrition, from a food industry standpoint, from a governmental policy standpoint, is on the rise and favorable, but I think they're clinging, like the dairy industry is so rapidly going downhill. But they're gonna fight back. They got the dollars to, publish this study 3 weeks ago about whole fat dairy, and the whole study was warped and funded in ways that it certainly seemed to influence its outcome.
So you mentioned before we started recording that you were on the doctors recently with a very smart scientist or doctor.
Yeah.
So what are, I'm fascinated by smart people who are well trained in science, who have different perspectives than me. I'm always looking for how are we differing? Are they looking at different evidence than we are? Are they interpreting it differently? Where is the gap for for intelligent people of goodwill?
Yeah. So one, it's the absence to discuss the environment. I said that before, I'll say it again. And I am somewhat parroting Dr. David Katz from Yale. To promote a dietary pattern and not include its impact on the environment is not consistent with 2018 screaming to 10 billion people on the planet that we have to feed and have enough air, water, and forests to survive. It's not possible. So that's one. And two, they will not discuss animal husbandry and CAFOs and antibiotic resistance at all. Those are issues. I mean, you might be eating pattern A, pattern B, pattern C for your personal health, but we are a community and we need to always bring that up as an issue. Thirdly, if you're willing to look at short-term studies, look at non-randomized studies, and look at studies that don't include cardiovascular endpoints. So as I said, there's a company out there that I'm not a particular fan of, Virta Health, VIRTA Health, that does online coaching using ketogenic style diets for type 2 diabetics. It's quite expensive. And they've published first 6-month and then 12-month data that looks rather favorable. And some people get off of meds, some people lose weight. Again, what diet are you starting at? Because all bad diets can be made better, but doesn't mean the diet that you're doing is really a good one. Two, there's no control group. All the authors and people involved are investors, which may or may not influence them. I don't know these people personally. And finally, they're relatively short term. I mean, atherosclerosis takes years to decades. Cancer takes years to decades to develop. So if you just pound in all these pro-aging, pro-cancer, pro-atherosclerosis food groups, you're not going to detect that in 6 or 12 months. And they're not even looking for it. They're not really looking at cardiovascular parameters. The idea here is that weight loss translates always to better survival and outcome. Well, unhealthy weight loss doesn't always translate to better survival, better outcome. So, I guess it depends what yardstick you're using to measure success.
Mm-hmm. So, is there anyone out there who is truly interested in the science? Like people who disagree, who say, let's do a study together and let's agree on. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? We need that in just in terms. I actually think, and Howard, you need to do this with me. It would be awesome to have a documentary called Stop Eating Junk that actually had the entire spectrum of foodies on it. Because even Dr. Sean Baker, the orthopedic surgeon who lost his medical license in New Mexico, but still gives health advice to all kinds of people and eats meat 3 times a day, would appear on that film and say, stop going to fast food restaurants, vending machines, hospital cafeterias, and school lunch trays. Eat better than that.
as well as Dr. Dean Ornish and Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn would agree, we could get 100 experts to come to unity, because that's probably a message that every American needs to hear. And when you and I are discussing low carb, high fat, we're talking to 15% of America maybe that are at this level of sophistication. So on a community level, there's very little. I actually, despite sometimes playing the warrior on various panels and conferences, actually do try, and I have more friends on the other side of the aisle than I think most do. As some people saw in November, I was out at Google headquarters, Googleplex, and had an hour-long discussion with Kip Anderson and Dave Asprey. Dave Asprey, a bulletproof coffee, 5.5 pounds of butter in your coffee every morning kind of guy. It's 2 tablespoons or 2 sticks, depending on what you want to do. And we can have an intelligent conversation. I certainly don't agree with everything he says. In terms of science, again, I'm probably going to say Kevin Hall, the name I mentioned. Everybody can look him up. He's not a celebrity, but he's a scientist who's active on Twitter and active in the blogosphere a bit. Walter Longo. I'm reaching over because we do want to always be sure to be somewhat crass and commercial and say, don't forget my book. But Dr. Walter Longo of the University of Southern California, the longevity diet book, and the creator of a food program called Prolon, or a fasting mimicking diet program. We can talk about that, which is actually a merger of all this. He's a scientist. He's above, titles, labels, and all. He's about what's most likely to activate pathways, what nutrition is most likely to activate pathways that promote health, longevity, and what's called health span. And in fact, his food program, which is plant-based, just got awarded the first patent ever for promoting healthy lifespan and regenerating the body. It's kind of an amazing thing that I saw that.
I had him on the podcast.
Good.
Thanks to your introduction. So you greased the wheels for that.
Good.
So and he and I didn't see eye to eye on a few things, and I assumed he's going to win the Nobel Prize, so I didn't want to embarrass myself but we kind of noodled around. His view is that people are the diet that you and I recommend is far too extreme for most people.
He's about La Dolce Vita, that pain and suffering. Yet he's still talking about 18 or 19 plant-based meals a week as the foundation of your long-term healthy plan. I mean, I think that's pretty strong vote in favor of not eating meat 3 times a day, which he would just say, nonsense from a scientific standpoint.
Right, and yet, so I'm thinking back to my Ultimate Frisbee buddies. It certainly is easier to get them to believe that a diet full of butter and bacon is healthier.
Right.
That and so he's got a point. I think we do have a palatability problem, at least not not necessarily in terms of actual food, but in terms of thinking about what would you rather do? So I'm part of this Well Start, and one of the things we're hearing from employers is my people aren't going to do this. We're stepping away from the word plant-based. We're trying to figure out is it anti-inflammatory diet or a microbiome happy diet, something that doesn't kind of signal to people that they have to quote give up or all their favorites.
It's called the good sex diet, and then they'll come on board.
Okay. I'm seeing a theme here.
Yeah. Well, I think it is a way to talk to people in a way that they I'm not talking down to anybody. It's a basic human function, and frankly, it's one of the best barometers of good cardiovascular health there is from a scientific standpoint. But you obviously have to give shout outs to Dr. Esselstyn. Is it extreme to eat plant-based, or is it extreme to have your chest cracked and take veins from your legs and have bypass, or have to use medications to have a sexual response, or have to take medications for your blood pressure, cholesterol, and blood sugar, and what's really extreme? But nonetheless, are we going to, what percentage of the population are we going to have largely or completely plant-based, in 10 years to 20 years? I mean, it's not going to be 50%, although the food industry may make that possible, with these pea protein fish products that are coming out at the end of this year, and increasingly just the success of Beyond Meat Burger and Impossible Burger, which I don't think are very healthy options, but they're healthier, and they're healthier for the environment and healthier for animals.
Yeah, they're more mind opening.
Yeah. Right. So there are those movements, and it's still such a crazy word, the reducetarian movement. Reduce your animal products, increase your fruit and vegetables, whole grains and legumes. That's successful. There's a conference in Los Angeles in September of that movement. Brian Castman, if I remember his name. There's Cateman, thank you. I put an S there. And then there's Michael Bittman, Vegan Before 6, breakfast, lunch. It's not a manly meal, so have your oatmeal and have your salad, but dinner's manly, so be sure to leave yourself time to hang with the buddies and have a steak. I mean, every one of those are important movements forward, but if you're a cardiovascular patient, they're not enough.
Gotcha. So you mentioned that you're going out to Plantrition. I guess that's in mid-September.
Yeah, right? San Diego, mid-September, right.
So I'll be there. I'm looking forward to hearing you. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I am talking about the role of plant-based nutrition and inflammation, because many people are familiar with, and I'm sure you've had guests on your podcast, that a whole list of lifestyle factors and other maladies can lead our body to cause a chemical reaction. The middle word of inflammation is flame, and you're on fire, and that can be measured through advanced lab testing, and it can be, for vegans, it's often omega-3 deficiency. It's often low vitamin D levels, and I am a fan of Dr. Michael Greger talking about taking routine small amounts of vitamin D and algae-based omega-3 if you're a totally plant-eating human, and I do that myself. It could be hidden dental infections, obesity around the belly, poor sleep apnea, psoriasis. Psoriasis is a terrible disease, more systemic than we used to think. But the data about the impact, Dr. Andrew Weil said 20 years ago a plant-strong diet was an anti-inflammatory diet, and he introduced the idea that diet can be pro-inflammatory, anti-inflammatory. And most of the data on meat, certainly processed meat, but even other forms of meat, is that it's inflammatory. It raises C-reactive protein. So we're going to talk about all that, because it's just one more way to feel that elephant in the 7 blind men when you lower inflammation, which is a huge part of what I do in my practice, the conversation with patients. We've got to get these numbers better, and we're going to go through your forks over knives diet, and we're going to go through your fitness program and your sleep and evaluate you for apnea, and nutritional adequacy. So that's what we'll be talking about.
Gotcha. So as I said, one of the things we're looking at as a moniker instead of plant-based is anti-inflammation diet. So help us talk to people who aren't well versed in physiology. Like what is inflammation is a natural body response to certain things. Like, right. So what's it for, and why does it seem to get triggered by things like excess fat and all?
So there's an acute inflammation response we're all very grateful for. You cut your finger, you get a mosquito bite, you have a cold, you want white cells, and you want the chemicals that come with white cells, chemokines, cytokines, chemotrypsins, whatever. You want an explosion of a response to kill that strep bacteria and put your throat and your lungs back to normal and get rid of that mosquito bite toxin and all the rest. That's an acute inflammatory response. It comes and it goes. But what we're talking about is chronic inflammation, of which you might feel psoriasis, eczema, colitis, sore joints, swollen joints, would be some of the more common, manifestations clinically. But really, it's also about chemistry diagnosis, that we have the extremely advanced ability to measure all kind of products in the blood, that the body only responds when something is not going well. And the challenge of advanced medicine, personalized medicine, integrated medicine is to figure out the why. It's not like we're not going to give steroids to everybody. That would do a great thing for a short term. That's like the ketogenic diet. It's like a steroid, but that doesn't mean it's the right thing long term. Take what do plant diets do? They take away some of the inflammatory measures. You do want to have a low sugar version of a plant diet. Would be optimal. Sugar may be inflammatory. Meats, as we said, processed meats the worst. All meats overall can be inflammatory. Exposure to heavy metals, which Think about mercury in fish, can be inflammatory, so we're going to miss out on those. And then there's some, unique particles in meat and eggs, TMAO, trimethylamine N oxide, new 5GC. I know this is alphabet soup. I'm not trying to impress anybody, but so we're taking those away, and what are we putting in? The nutrients, the vitamins, the fibers, the vitamin C, the magnesium, the vitamin D in mushrooms, the brightly colored polyphenols and flavonols and all these beautiful things that are hard to, just eat a salad. I mean, a salad's anti-inflammatory. A hamburger and fries is pro-inflammatory. Another part is how you cook things. When you take a piece of chicken and you boil it, it's less inflammatory than when you take a piece of chicken and you barbecue the heck out of it. And you take a portobello and barbecue it, it's nowhere near as inflammatory as a piece of chicken barbecued. It's an innate group of chemical process called advanced glycation end products. So we have an advantage when you eat a largely, or as I do and you do, I believe, eat only plants. It's by nature. Now we can goose it up. Turmeric, very anti-inflammatory. Ginger, very anti-inflammatory. Garlic, onions, very anti-inflammatory. Rosemary, very anti-inflammatory. So don't forget our friends, fresh organic spices, as part of the inflammation protocol.
Mm-hmm. So help me draw the line between the chronic inflammation and so why do these things cause between the acute, which we like, right? It saves our lives. It keeps
Right.
kills things and removes toxins. So are you basically saying that eating all these foods and getting the heavy metals is basically like constantly being attacked by substances that our body needs to deal with? Like it's like constantly getting cuts and bruises and bacterial infections and mosquito bites that basically we're just constantly doing harm, and so this response is never gets to stop.
Exactly. It's, again, Dr. Greger's great analogy of the standard American diet of you knock your shin up against a coffee table, it's all bruised, but 3 times a day you keep knocking, it's never going to heal. And we do know that introducing high-fat diets from an animal basis, as you mentioned, probably dairy, even, and of course, in some people, wheat-based products, if they have celiac sensitivity, you actually can make your gut leaky enough that bacterial products that should be only in your GI tract leak into your blood. It's called postprandial endotoxemia, a bacterial toxin that can get in your blood after a single meal. It was shown in 1996 by Robert Vogel, MD, that a single sausage egg McMuffin from McDonald's causes a rise in this bacterial product because it makes your GI wall instantly leaky and then it damages your arteries. So one meal, one bout of inflammation. We're talking, though, for most people, it's 3-4 times a day of a food-based inflammatory process. And there are other factors. There are the skin, the lupus, the factors are silent dental infections. You really have to hunt sometimes. But step one, clean up the diet. And I would clean it up to a plant diet. My friend Jason Fung, MD, who was on the doctor's show against me, would clean it up to a ketogenic diet. They're both cleaner than what a lot of people are walking in the office to start with.
All right, so you talked about the causes of inflammation. What are the sequelae? Why should we be worried about inflammation particularly?
Yeah, because chronic inflammation is associated with premature loss of memory, Alzheimer's. Chronic inflammation is associated with premature vascular disease, heart attack, strokes, erectile dysfunction, and such. Type 2 diabetes, for sure. Trying to think what other major illnesses on the horizon. I mean, high blood pressure tends to be a chronic inflammatory disease. And so, they're all the big ones. They're all the important ones. And which is why, of course, the overall body of literature for plant diets, when you do like Dr. Neil Bernard did, I think in May of 2018, lump all the data for cardiovascular disease for plant diets. There's a 40% drop in cardiovascular disease rates on average across a whole broad spectrum of studies, because one function of adopting a plant diet is lowering chronic inflammation or maybe completely eliminating it. Yeah.
Gotcha. So if it could be stuff, if I'm eating, whole food plant-based diet, but I don't know if I have, dental infections. I snore. I had sleep apnea. I've been doing a bunch of things. I still don't know, I don't want to spend another $600 on a sleep study. Are there simple, easy, affordable tests to assess inflammation?
Yeah, the simplest one is a blood test that your local doctor can do, and I would certainly believe it's way under $50 and likely to be covered by your insurance plan. The high sensitivity C-reactive protein, also called HS-CRP. Many people believe it should be a routine blood test, although just in the past 10 days, the U.S. Preventive Task Force said we're not quite ready for prime time. Every doctor in America checking a high sensitivity C-reactive protein. I think it's more because the physicians aren't trained to ask the next question if it's high. Get a sleep test, get a dental exam, get some nutritional history out of people. It slows down your visit, and you have to be fairly personalized about it. So high sensitivity C-reactive protein. If that's low, then you're probably your snoring isn't really a serious factor, and your diet is working optimally. But a huge number of people are elevated.
Gotcha. And how sensitive is this to like an Egg McMuffin? So is it more like A1C or blood glucose?
More like A1C. Yeah, it will change quicker than A1C, and that's a 2 to 3 month diabetic blood average test that's very useful to get. C-reactive protein could fall within less than a month, but it's not going to. Yeah, I don't believe you'll see it rise with one single meal. You'll be able to measure other things with one. I'm a cardiologist. Our artery function deteriorates with one milkshake. That was a study in the last 12 months. With one sausage egg McMuffin. That was that study in the 1990s, and others. So there's actually the best study ever done was a study of arterial function where they actually healthy volunteers got a hospital hamburger right out of the hospital cafeteria to the hospital research lab, fed it to healthy volunteers, artery function hit the bottom within 4 hours that they measured. Then they had on another day people do the same thing, eating the same burger but with a giant salad, or eating the same burger with a giant avocado. And there was no longer a significant drop in artery function. That the antidote is, even if you got a garbage diet, add fruits and vegetables. Now, the optimal is leave the burger in the hospital cafeteria and be sure to protest that they improve the quality of their food, so they take it off the menu, so it doesn't enhance the risk of colorectal cancer, breast cancer, and cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and congestive heart failure. But hospital administrators don't listen to your podcast, so unfortunately they won't do that.
So I know like Dr. Sarai Stancic is active in trying to talk some sense.
Right.
Like what there have been a few places around the country, a few like bright lights that have changed. Do you have a sense of like the politics or the social movement? Like, is this a trend? Is there growing pressure?
Yeah, we do need to give a shout out to Dr. Robert Osfeld in Montefiore, New York. I'll be at his conference in October on the panel, and what he's done to have every hospital room actually shows forks over knives on a continuous loop. If you happen to turn on that channel, you can be in the emergency room having chest pain and actually learn from Dr. Esselstyn that you can eat your way out of it and go home. Although I'm not suggesting that. It's pretty radical that he's got that accomplished, plus a cafeteria with wonderful plant options in a inner city, low-income neighborhood, which is, the final victory for it all. And there's other great places, St. Joseph Mercy Hospital in Ann Arbor, close to me, and others. But do I think it's moving fast? Very slowly. We are seeing less McDonald's and less Wendy's, thank God, in children's hospitals and adult hospitals. We still have Wendy's in one of the hospitals I attend at, so I protested, so they added a Chick-fil-A right next to it because they said, fungu, we got to make some money. And another hospital I'm at is putting in Wahlburgers. Of course, it's got to be good for you if Mark Wahlberg eats it. I don't think he'd actually eat that food. He wouldn't stay young looking very long. It's slowly moving. I think the young generation, the medical students, are occasionally getting lectures, and actually occasionally, like Tulane University, getting cooking classes. Oh my God, a generation of physicians, nurses, dentists, chiropractors, physician assistants that can actually at least ask, what do you eat? And watch forks over knives. I mean, that takes 1 minute. That's what I did for a lot of years till I changed my practice to really educate people on full immersion into plant diet.
Now, you are co-founder, I think, of the Plant-Based Nutrition Support Group, this amazing community organization out of Detroit area. And one of the things I think you guys are doing is going around to medical schools, right?
Right. So this is a group that's now about 4.5 years old with more than 5,000 members in southeastern Michigan. We thought there'd be 20 members. And Paul Chatlin, to give credit to one of the heroes of America, has put his heart and soul and asked me 4.5 years ago if I would join him on this great mission, which we thought was going to be a small mission. But yeah, we'll have superstars like you or superstars like Dr. Esselstyn or Juliana Hever. And when they're in town, we schlep them to Wayne State University School of Medicine, the largest medical school in America. They won't let us on the curriculum, but they'll let us do a lunch and learn if we bring the lunch and provide the entertainment. Why not? We'll schlep them occasionally. University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. They're a little stuffier. They're getting a little more blue blazer, Mayo Clinic kind of types. And we actually have one other medical school. We have a few around here that will drag the expert to. So that's been quite impactful. But and I'm excited. Those 24-year-old medical students, half of them are already saying I eat largely plant-based, and they show up at my restaurants, and they're excited about talking about all this. So the future's bright, but that's 10 to 15 years of development till we'll see the real impact of all that.
Yeah, so I'm curious because I wasn't one of the people schlepped to Wayne State for whatever reason, but I have to say I am a little bit intimidated by doctors, right? So like I kind of hold back. One of the Frisbee players is a cardiologist.
Meat-eating cardiologist?
Yeah. As
you know what Dr. Kim Williams says about that?
Yeah,
there's only two kinds of cardiologists, either vegans or those that don't read the literature. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, he had read the literature. Our main disagreement was on whether the value of the non-clinical trial evidence, right? Like
there's good clinical trial. I mean, it's very hard. I don't think, and you know it, and I know it. What Dr. Dean Ornish was able to accomplish in 1990, and then his 5-year follow-up in 1998, to actually do a 48-patient study with the best technology in the world, with two very different diet and lifestyle programs, and demonstrate an amazing response that, as larger numbers became available, became a Medicare-approved program, the Ornish Intensive Cardiac Rehab Lifestyle Program. I mean, for somebody else, we'd all love to see more of those studies. They're difficult, and he had fairly lush funding from some of his, even though he's a very young man, from some of the people he was able to get around. I'm sure he wouldn't call it lush, but compared to Dr. Esselstyn, it was lush.
Yeah.
But yes. When you take the weight of all that data and the total absence, I mean, that's what Dr. Longo talks about, and maybe did the 5 pillars. What do people that live to 100 healthy and beyond eat? Well, it's not meat 3 times a day, and all those, the pillars of evidence. I think they so align with plant diets, and nowhere stronger than for cardiovascular disease prevention and reversal.
Right. Well, I sent him a couple of my books. I'll if I hear back from him, I'll send him one of yours as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you're talking to these medical students, and let's say the ones that aren't, plant curious already or aren't kind of on board, what kind of impact can you have? Because I'm thinking about like the research of a guy, Greg Walton, who came up with something called wise interventions, which was basically like figuring out something that you could do in an hour that would impact people iteratively over time. You would change a little bit of their perspective, and so it would and then they would change their behavior a little bit. Their environment would reflect it, and so this 1-hour intervention could have a disproportionately outsized effect over time. And I'm wondering whether you're finding that they're hearing all this stuff in medical school about pathology, about drug treatments, and they're not hearing anything about lifestyle. And if you come in and you say a few common sense words, does it change things for them?
Yeah, I think it can. What what comes to mind immediately is when I talk to people. I stole this from Kathy Freston years ago, and I try and steal everything I can from Kathy Freston. But 3 tips for people to get started, and tip number 1 was banish dairy, which has become easier and easier and easier and easier. So I just had a patient sitting in my office 45 minutes ago, and he's made a big transition to plant diet. He just doesn't want to give up coffee creamer. And honestly, I'm a board-certified cardiologist and a professor at 2 universities, and I printed off a guide on the web about 8 great non-dairy substitutes for coffee creamer, because I think it's going to be one of those, wise moments where, 2 to 3 times a day, I think for the rest of his life, he's going to be going for the hemp milk coffee creamer, not the rather poor quality powdered or cow-based liquid one. So I agree with you. Little wins like that, little substitutes. I mean, whether it's an egg omelet to an egg white omelet, which is a very small step, but it's a step. And then from an egg white omelet to a bowl of oatmeal. And, the last step is oatmeal with kale, and make Dr. Esselstyn smile. But that's for the Olympic plant eater with cardiovascular focus. So, yeah, I mean, just upping fruits and vegetables.
Right, but
the power.
Specifically for these medical students.
Right.
Like, it's like when I hear from doctors,
right.
I mean, I don't think I've talked to a doctor yet who started out plant-based, right? Who didn't, like, they've typically.
I was plant-based before medical school.
Were you?
I was age 18, so it was before.
Well, there we go. So you came in and you took everything that you learned with a stalk of kale.
That's true. But when I speak to medical students, it's like wow moments. They've never heard that type 2 diabetes could possibly be reversed by lifestyle. Now, I would talk about plant-based lifestyle and Dr. Barnard's 76-week randomized study. Dr. Fung might talk about a 52-week non-randomized study using other sources, but even just opening their mind, and same with cardiovascular disease, and same with potentially high blood pressure, and same with potential. We all imagine if you're overweight and you change your diet, you lose weight, though we know that's about 98% ineffective long-term with most of the techniques out there. But that actual chronic diseases, which are linked to chronic inflammation most commonly, can actually be reversed. That there's a prostate cancer study by Dr. Dean Ornish that shows shrinkage and reduction. I mean, they do not hear this. It's not on the boards. And boy, you can get them hooked into reading more.
That's what I'm wondering about, because it would be, if I'm thinking about myself, if I had invested this much in an education and I'm surrounded by people I regard as incredibly smart and hardworking, and I don't hear about this, I feel like it would be really easy for me to dismiss you coming in as some sort of quack, because like the medical field has like really, really powerful anti-quack antibodies. And
it's true.
It's like, like now it's like this autoimmune disease. It's attacking itself. It's attacking the best of medicine because it suspects quackery, because how could this possibly be true if I haven't learned it here?
Right. Yeah. And the skepticism is higher in your friend, the over 50 cardiologist, who has been going potentially to medical meetings and grand rounds. And unless he hangs with Kim Williams in the nutrition section of the American Heart Association meetings, he's hearing about drugs and stents and surgery and laser and stem cell. So I would see him being even more resistant. The medical students are malleable, and there's still a little bit of I'm blanking on the term, but they still have the faith they can actually help people, and what could be more impactful than helping people out of illness. So sometimes I actually got to put a muzzle on some of these kids. They want to go after their attendings and say, but you walked away from the bedside and you didn't mention, that there is the potential. So some of them have like little cards. You really ought to watch this movie, and they just give them on the patient's tray as they walk out. Or you're at Montefiore Hospital and you can turn on channel 42 or whatever it is and watch it.
Gotcha. So I want to come back. You mentioned 3 of the tips you stole from Kathy Freston. We've only got 1 of them. So I'm feeling a powerful open loop that I want you to fill before you go.
That's fine. Number 2 was eat an apple a day. Just one way of introducing more fruits and vegetables into the diet. Of course, an apple a day, keep a doctor away, probably has more value to it than we give it credit for as a wise tale. Number 3 was bean burger, not a beef burger. And, just, not 100 things to do. Frankly, I often ask on my first visit just one, the dairy. And I'll help them with it, with a list of dairy substitutes or creamers. I identify what's your hang up. Is it butter? So we got Earth Balance. Although, I don't personally use much Earth Balance and things like that. So yeah, those are the three.
So is the dairy the first one because it's the easiest, or because it's the worst thing you could be eating?
Well, if you're a fan of Dr. Colin Campbell, as you are and I am, and we believe that casein may be the most pro-cancerous of all potentiators on top of the environment. But for me, it's just simply, every grocery store will have almost everything except for the upper end cheeses that they might be buying at an elegant cheese shop, and that's only a matter of time till they can buy Gruyere. I don't even know. I don't buy cheese, but yeah, it's easy. I mean, what's the big deal? There's 15 kinds of plant milks, if we can still call them milks legally, and there's many kinds of butter substitutes, and many kinds of ice cream substitutes, and sour cream, and yogurt, and coffee creamer. So yes, they can get off dairy, boom, and have very little pain in the process, and very often acne, GI upset, migraines, and other things improve, and you've got them into the idea that food really is information to the body.
Is information?
Right. I believe it. You believe it. Well,
Say
food is
more about
information. So it's kind of interesting. I just wrote a little book chapter, but 1993, the Human Genome Project was announced, and I think I got the date right. I don't think it was 2003. But an earthworm has 30,000 genes. When this project was announced, a combination of the NIH and Craig Venter out in San Diego, it was discovered we have about 22,000 genes. We have less genes than an earthworm. And really, if you even look at it now, all these years later, the era of genetic ability to treat disease is very close to being on the horizon, but not much has happened. Very soon after that, we learned a different term, epigenetic. We may not have many genes, but we've got a much more elegant system that turns on and turns off genes compared to an earthworm. The best example of that is Dr. Dean Ornish doing studies on men with prostate cancer. You give up your bad diet for a plant diet plus a little meditation, walking, and love and support. In 3 months, all these genes that promote cancer turn off, and all these genes that promote healing turn on. So food did that. Food speaks to our genetic material in terms of what it's going to do. And that gets to why plants are anti-inflammatory. It actually shuts down the output of our genes and our ribosomes and the proteins we make. NF-kappa B, if anybody's a biochemical fan. So yeah, food is information, and it's just, instant information. I mean, what you eat now is in your bloodstream in 40 minutes. It's circulating to every endothelial cell, causing constriction and platelet aggregation and atherosclerosis, or it's not. I'd rather have blood that's chemotherapeutic. I'd rather have blood that's anti-atherosclerotic, and that's possible to do. Brightly colored fruits and vegetables, organic more than conventional if your budget allows.
Great. I know we only have a couple more minutes. I want to give people a chance to find you. I want you to talk about your book. We're doing a video, so people can watch this on YouTube, but also for just people who are just listening, who have the pleasure of seeing your Shayna Punham.
Thank you very much. Thank you, yes. But no, the Plant-Based Solution came out January 2018. It's very up to date. It's a simple book to read, but pretty much everything we talked about is in there with references and a little more embellished. I am in Detroit, Michigan, the Kahn Center for Cardiac Longevity. I own 3 restaurants, Green Space Cafe, 2 in Detroit, 1 in Austin, Texas, a food truck, and drjoelkahn.com, DrJoelKahn.com, drjoelkahn.com. As you know, Howard, I'm very active on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and my professional Facebook page, Dr. Joel Kahn.
Great. One last question. Do you have any plans to franchise? Because it seems like you figured out a bunch of things that, I was thinking if I or my daughter or folks wanted to start something up, you probably have a lot of intelligence about plant-based food startups that we don't.
I'd give you the same advice I got. How do you make a small fortune in the restaurant business? You start with a large fortune. It's a challenging business. We are going to expand. We grew to 3 locations in less than 3 years, and we're regrouping, and that's what we're marching on now. Smaller is better. We have a grab-and-go fast casual concept that's doing very well. Startup costs are less, and I think that's the model. It's called Green Space and Go in Royal Oak, Michigan. I think that's a model that we'll be duplicating. But absolutely, it's needed. I mean, I own elegant, beautiful. 2 of the 3 are completely organic restaurants. The third one's non-GMO and largely organic. I mean, this is high-end LA, New York food, and it's working. And we need more. And there's lots of customer base. So I'm excited about it all. I don't regret it. It's a family business with my wife and my son. But everything you've heard about the restaurant business is true, but the joy is very high. To feed, almost 2,000 people a week, great food, and get congratulated for it, is a rewarding thing to do.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Joel Kahn, it's always great to see you, to talk to you. I guess I'll see you at Plantstock in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, Plantstock, great. I've never been to Asheville. I'm very excited about going to Asheville.
Yeah, maybe we can lure you away. We can
yeah,
get another plant-based talk and
play a little ultimate frisbee with Garth Davis or something.
Right on. I'll see you there. I'll see you at Plantrition, and thank you for all you do.
Thank you. Very excited to be conversing with you today.
All right. Take care. Be well.